Good afternoon, Georgina, and thank you very much for giving the Mint some time this afternoon to talk about your bank. So I wanted to start with asking what makes Handelsbanken different from other banks?
I think there are lots of things that makes us different, but I'll try and keep it to the core. I mean, we are a relationship bank. We have a decentralised model, and the difference that you'll find there is that we empower our branches to make the majority of the decisions for the customer. We're very customer centric, so you're walking to our branch and you'll see someone who can actually make a decision there and then about the products or the solutions that you're looking for. And I think that in the UK is quite different than you may experience in other high street banks.
So how do you manage to do that? Firstly, why do the main street banks not do that? Because it seems a sort of obvious thing to do, that you want to deal with someone who can make decisions. And secondly, if they don't do that because it's too difficult, how are you actually able to make that possible?
Obviously I can't comment on their strategy and why they've chosen a different route. For us, it makes complete sense, and it's not something new. This is something that we've been doing for a long time. So the model that we use here in the UK is the same that we use all over the Handelsbanken group. It's been around since the 1970s, so it's not a new idea, a new strategy. And for us, it all started with someone called Verlander, who was the CEO in Sweden. He came into the bank at a time where it was struggling in Sweden, and he decided to do something quite radical. Our bank was like every other high street bank previously.
When was this?
This was in the 1970s, 1971, I think, yes.
Because in 1971, my picture, I had a bank account in 1971 too. Actually, maybe I didn't, but not quite. I'm not quite that old, but. There is the story of the local bank manager who did make decisions, and if your father knew him, you got etc. etc. So why was it radically different at that time for Handelsbanken to? Yeah,
well, I think some of the things that he did was really about the empowerment of the branch manager. So it was removing layers of middle management from the structure of the bank and actually making a very flat structure where the branch actually took the majority of the decisions, and the people in head office were there to support the branch, not the other way around. And what you find in high street banks now and back then was...
Even back then that was true, because there was the myth of the bank manager who made all the decisions, but it was a myth, was it even?
I'm not saying it was a myth, but I'm saying in the organisation that Verlander came into, there was many levels of management, and actually to get to a decision point and to go work your way through the hierarchy, it took some time and it was costly, and for the customer maybe the not best decision making or not quick decision making. So what he decided was to actually, he was a humanist, so he believed in the empowering of humans to make the right decision. He thought that if you allow people and trust people to be empowered to do the right thing, they'll come into work every day and they will strive to do a better job. He didn't think that anyone came into work wanting to do a bad job. So he took this humanist view and he put it into the model in Handelsbanken and really said, let's cut out all the middle management and all the central targets and all of the kind of sales and products driven that we see in lots of other banks, and actually let's leave it down to the individuals in the branches who are close to the customers to make the right choices for the customers that they know. And that is the model that we've kind of lived with since then, and we found in the UK it to be very successful. Now in the UK obviously people think of it as the traditional way of banking, almost anti the modern way of banking, but actually we don't see it like that at all. We think you can have a relationship bank and have digital solutions, have the same concepts that you have in many other banks, but the bit that we will never change is the personal service, the relationship side. We believe that's what makes us different, and also that's what our customers really value.
It's interesting that in a sense you're saying that, I'm listening and I think, well, that's obvious, isn't it? Why wouldn't you do it? But if you look at so many areas, not just banks but government, NHS, that where there have been moves to say, teachers as well. We've got to make them accountable. We've got to measure them. We've got to them performance targets. We've got to centrally set them. This model is pervasive. It's not
Yeah.
just banks. It's across the society in which we live in.
Yeah, and it's not an easy thing to live by. Everyone says they put the customer first. That's kind of a slogan that every industry, retail, banking, everyone uses it. But actually, to do that properly, to really sometimes make a decision that is in the best interest of the customer, but not necessarily the most profitable for the bank, that's really living to the values and the culture that you believe in. And I think that's what makes us different. We haven't changed the model. We've kept the same values and culture for a long period of time. So it's not new CEO comes in, now we're going to restructure, do things differently. We actually believe that this is the right way to do banking, so it's easy for us.
But I suppose that what's interesting is you have maintained the faith in humanity in a way, whereas in so many other areas that faith has been lost. And typically we remember, with teachers, suddenly there was a whole lot of stories about teachers not teaching properly and being useless and complaints, etc. And then you get the national curriculum, so everything's determined, and then the teachers complain that they're no longer treated as professionals. They get deeply demotivated, leave, and things get worse, and so the centre then responds by trying to control them even more.
Absolutely.
And so often you get into this sort of cycle of control and counter control and so on.
Absolutely.
And I'm interested, so the fact that you've kept the faith, is that because of this very strong initial values of humanism that have been kept hold of?
I think so, and I think when we recruit, it's very important for us that we recruit people that share the values and that buy into the culture here, because I think it's part of the deal, if you like. If you want to come and work at Handelsbanken, you need to understand what we are and what we're not. We're not going to have bonuses. We're not going to have sales targets.
So no bonuses.
No bonuses. A very, very small amount of bonuses in a tiny bit of the investment banking still, but in the retail banking, in the branches, there's no bonuses. So, compared to other banks, you're choosing, I guess, an option where long-term is where we're looking. We're looking at giving a return and value to a customer on a long term. And we think if you have a culture of bonuses and targets, that drives people to think in a short-term way. It's coming to the end of the month. I need to hit my product sales target for the month, so I'm going to try and sell you things. Maybe they're not the best things you need, but I've got, there's in my mind the target that I'm under. That drives the wrong behaviour in our minds. Actually, what we want is to people to think about the customer and think about this is the right solution in the long term for the customer. Actually, secondary, my personal agenda or the bank's, necessarily the profitability, etc. That also comes into it, but the customer. What the customer needs should be the primary driver.
And how do you seem such a sort of outlier in a way in the banking industry. Presumably most people in banking expect to get bonuses. That's just the norm. So do people sort of, when you say to them they apply for a job and you say to them no bonuses, do they fall off the seat? Or do you actually, they just don't apply? And so where do you find the people who will apply to your jobs?
I think we have a very good selection process, a good recruitment process. I think when we are meeting people, what we're offering them is more than just the remuneration package. It's a chance to come somewhere where their values are shared, they're empowered to make decisions, they can make a difference to the customers that are in front of them. And they come sometimes from other banks where they felt frustrated with the levels of hierarchy, the decisions being taken in centre and not necessarily them being masters of their own destiny and not being able to give the customer always what they want. So I think that they come with their own experiences and they look for something that isn't just based on the bonus structures. It's also about the development that we put into our people, the fact that we allow people to grow, we give them trust and empowerment, and actually I think people see that as part of the the intangible package that they get at Handelsbanken.
What about, because a lot of this obviously is about values, there is other sort of dimension to values that also is growing in banks, is a consideration of who you're lending to and for what, and especially at the moment with net zero carbon target, the campaign to divest from fossil fuel companies and so on. Where do you stand on those sorts of values?
I mean, The decision in terms of the customers that we select and you know the people that we work with are really done at a local level. So it's down to the local branch manager to look at the customers and the people that you know are in his patch and decide who are the right people for him. So we're not prescriptive in Handelsbanken in terms of we only want people who do this or we don't want people who do that. It's very much, you know, the decision of the branch manager in that local area, and that will look different in different parts of the country. You know, a branch manager working in Kensington will have a completely different mix of business than someone working in rural Yorkshire, for example.
But I can imagine that the business outside the bank will be different. But you did say, I mean, on values of how you treat people and so forth, you're sort of uniform. You don't let one bit of the bank sort of treat people differently. But on a question of, you know, if one branch said we are going to cease lending to any fossil fuel company and any companies related who service fossil fuel companies, say, which is, you know, presumably a large sector. An individual branch would do that, but you would never say, well, that's a value we should take up as an organisation.
So there are a couple of things that we do centralise. So not, I think I said at the beginning, the majority of decisions are made in the branch. Now, our credit policy is something that is centralised. So if we make a decision based on risk into not lend to a certain, could be based on risk or appetite or, you know, any type of thing that we decide as a bank, this is not something we want to be involved in. That's in our policy, and all the branches would adhere to that. So they have freedom within a framework, but there are certain things like our HR policy, you know, how we recruit. We need to be sure that, you know, diversity and equality, etc., is the same throughout our organisation, regardless if the branch manager is responsible locally for recruitment. So there are certain areas where we wouldn't allow, you know, people to be outliers in a branch and kind of, you know, choose to deal with organisations that the bank as a whole wouldn't be happy with.
So are there any central policies in existence at the moment that would exclude you from lending to certain sectors of the economy?
Yes, so we do have a group sustainability policy which will have certain areas where we don't want to do business. Also, our credit policy will cover you know, sustainability factors as well as other factors when we're making lending decisions, and those are central policies that all the branches, even though the decision making is decentralised, they have to adhere to those central policies.
Brilliant. And moving on then to another sort of strategic direction, one of the complaints against a lot of banks is that they've sort of become machines for giving out mortgages, and they've lost the skill set, if you like, to actually lend into what is sometimes called the real economy. And that affects the ability of Britain's success in industry and so on, because we don't have a banking sector. Actually, I believe the figures are that the industrial sectors actually are net lenders to banks, not vice versa. Are you different in any way in that context as well?
Yeah, I would say we're very different, and I think again back to kind of being in the local market. So we have something called the church spire principle. So our branches, they have a very well defined patch that they're allowed to kind of work under, and that what that does and what the strength of that is that they understand the local economy. They have a very close relationships and networks in that local economy, and so they are really lending to SMEs, they're lending to small, you know, owner-managed businesses, they're lending to entrepreneurs, they're lending to all different types of people in that local economy. So we you know, I mean, SME lending is one of our largest areas of lending. So we're not a bank that is just lending to financial institutions. In fact, that's quite a small proportion of the lending that we do.
And mortgages, what's your percentage of mortgages?
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but we do a lot of mortgages, not just kind of individual mortgages, but also buy-to-let and kind of small property business mortgages as well. So we do, you know, we are lending to real people in real
a wide
communities.
Diversity.
Absolutely, yeah.
But a lot of the SMEs and so forth, which other banks have been criticised for not really dealing with, and indeed in some cases treating them incredibly badly.
And I think because we offer a slightly more tailored approach to sitting down and understanding actually the business, where you're going, your plans, etc. We're not offering an off-the-shelf product list. We're actually offering solutions to meet each individual customer's needs. So that offers the ability for us to really understand if it's an SME, where that SME is going, and also to make a really good risk-based decision so that we make the right decisions for the customer and also for the bank.
But I suppose the immediate sort of thing is, well, that must cost money, mustn't it? Because if I'm just given a standard product, there's a low transaction costs, etc., etc. So, do I have to pay a lot more for?
And I think when it comes to pricing, again, that is very individually set in each branch. So it's not a case of us having a set product list with set pricing or tariffs. It will be dependent on each individual corporate or individual circumstances. But what we found is that the customers that come to us, they find us competitive. We're growing in customer numbers, so we think that our products are competitive. It's difficult to compare us to high street banks because we do offer a variety of products that maybe don't fit a plain vanilla product list. So I think what we find is the customers choose us for the service, but also that we're competitive on price.
And how long have you actually been in the UK, and how far have you grown?
So, we started in the UK, it was in the 80s, but we really started growing from 2001 onwards. That's when we really started to organically grow our network of branches. We're now at 207 branches in the UK,
right.
And we have about 2,500 employees.
So how, for instance, do you compare to the size of Metro Bank?
I think Metro Bank are around 70 branches currently, and we're at 207.
So that's 3 times the size of that.
Yes.
And do you see yourself as a challenger bank? Is that?
I think we find that quite an interesting title that we've been given because we've been doing the banking in this model for such a long time. We don't see ourselves in the same as an Aldermore or a Metro Bank. But I think we're also called a disruptor to the market. I can understand why we're giving that title because we offer something different to your kind of normal big high street bank. But if challenger means we are ambitious and we see opportunity to grow, then yes.
And is are any other banks trying to copy you or use a similar model?
Well, if you mentioned Metro Bank, you could say that they are still holding on to the branch model. I think we would say that there is quite a lot of difference still between our branches and Metro Bank branches and our offering and what Metro Bank offer. So, we don't think there is anyone else offering the same level of customer service and the same kind of decentralised model as we offer in the UK.
And is it right that as a result of this, the impacts of the crash were less in 2008, were less on your bank than others?
Absolutely. Right? In fact, what we've found, and when we look back in history in Sweden as well, we tend to do quite well out of economic crisis. We tend to ride the storm quite well. And the reason that we do is because we choose our customers or they choose us and we share values and we have a long-term relationship, we kind of ride through the storm quite well. We're a risk-averse bank. We make good decisions. We tend to not switch and change kind of strategy too often. And if you stick to what you're good at and you believe in what you're doing, you can, we find, kind of ride through some of the economic cycles.
And what about the upcoming potential no deal exit? How are you prepared for that?
So we had to do quite a lot of preparation at Handelsbanken because we were passported into the UK. So we were a branch of our Swedish parent. So we had to do actually quite a large restructuring of operations here in the UK to move our business into a subsidiary and get a banking licence to be supervised here by the PRA and the FCA. So there was a lot of work we put into that in the last couple of years to future-proof ourselves from any Brexit scenario, to be honest, because even back when the vote came in, it was unclear whether there would be an equivalence to passporting or what the path ahead would be. Sadly, we still have complete ambiguity about what's going to come. But what we did was, I guess, make sure that we took control of the situation. And
we took back control of it.
But I think for us it was important because we're here to stay. We want to continue to grow in the UK. So we really felt very strongly that to ensure that we could change our structure and build on the opportunity here in the UK to grow further, we wanted to move into a subsidiary and create the UK PLC, which it is now. So from that side, from the major disruption to our business, we have kind of gone through the change already. Obviously, there is still impacts of Brexit, unknown
on your clients,
at the moment, on our clients, on cross-border sharing of data, on cross-border legal arrangements. There's a huge number of things that everyone in financial services is watching and waiting to see what happens. We, like everyone else, we have contingency plans, we've done analysis, etc., to ensure that our customers and our operations are as protected as possible. But I guess there's a limit to what you can do with so much uncertainty still.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, and thank you very much for giving us the time today.
Thank you.